All right, everybody, welcome to First Attack, this time with sound. I am Chen, and tonight okay, so if you guys remember watching last week, I did an Ask jchensor segment where I answered a whole bunch of questions.
Too loud?
I'm too loud now? I'm too loud, really? Okay. How's this sound? Okay, is this better now, guys? Okay. So, last week I did an Ask jchensor segment where I answered a bunch of questions. There was a couple of questions that I ran into that were particularly interesting to me, and one of them was let me see if I can find the question here. It was asked a very, very long time ago. In fact, I think it was a question all the way out from like January or something. But it seemed like a very it was a harmless question enough. In January, Max Noren Barhall asked me, how do you choose your character / team? That I've covered already. But the second half of the tweet was the interesting part. And he says, and do you think in different ways in different games? I really wanted to answer that question last week, but I figured it was something that might be important to kind of cover in its own episode. And the reason why is because I wanted to talk about a lot of the different games and give some lengthy examples and exactly how it works. So, I would have loved to have been able to pop in all these games and show you, concrete examples, but probably take more time switching the game. So, if you guys want to, during the commercial or whatever like that, talk about Gangnam Style, really? Dude, the best part was during the tournament between Yipes and Chris G, there was one point where DJ Hoshin, who was on commentary, said, yeah, Chuck and Plasma, and the first thing that made me think of was Gangnam Style. I don't know why, and I just I tweeted it, and I don't think anyone got it, but it was anyways, one of these days I'll explain it in full. But yeah, he said yeah a lot. Yeah, exactly. Hey, sexy lady, and then all I pictured was Sulfus spamming style. So, but anyway, what I wanted to talk about was, mindsets from different games. And this is actually really, really super important because one of the things that Vi has been preaching for a very, very long time is playing multiple games, playing different games, because they teach you different strategies, they teach you different fundamentals and mentalities. And this can actually be gained from understanding that you're playing a lot of these games with different mindsets. It's what makes changing games so hard to do. One of the things that's really interesting is that a lot of Street Fighter games actually do have very similar mindsets. I think the game with the most dissimilar mindset out of all Street Fighter games is Third Strike, but that has its own mindset. But basically a lot of the Street Fighter games have their own mindset. So let's talk about this a little bit. Let's get into the mindset of the different fighting games and how you want to think about when you play these fighting games. Street Fighter is always the very best place to start. It's always the best place to start because Street Fighter, the reason why Street Fighter is so popular, the reason why Street Fighter is still the most played game out of every game right now is because Street Fighter is by far the most straightforward. You are given, when we talk about Street Fighter as being a high-speed chess, that's kind of what it is. So let's even bring it back even further. Let's talk about chess, right? Chess is a mindset of taking your pieces, the stuff that you have, the tools that you have, and being able to use those tools properly for defense and for offense, figuring out a perfect balance and trapping and defeating your opponent. That's essentially what Street Fighter 2 is in a lot of ways. Street Fighter 4 is very similar. You have your characters, you have your set of moves, you have, the tools that you have, and your whole goal really is, how do I use these tools to drain my opponent's life, prevent my life from draining, and win the round? It's a very simple, basic mindset. And because of that, that is exactly what makes Street Fighter so approachable, so playable, and why to this day it is still the most played game and probably will always be the most played game. No matter how popular any of these other games come out, no matter how crazy these things have, Street Fighter is going to be the most played because when you play the game, you have the best idea of what you're supposed to do. Get in the game, beat your opponent. That's it. Your whole goal, use what you have, beat your opponent. Now, it's kind of funny because a lot of people will probably think to themselves, well, isn't that true for every game? How can a mindset be different, right? When you're playing King of Fighters, when you're playing Persona, if you're playing Guilty Gear, if you're playing Marvel, isn't your mindset just to use the tools that you have and beat the opponent down as fast as possible? The answer is, at the base, yes. But then stuff gets layered on top of it. And this is, I guess, I don't want to call it the metagame because everybody uses the word metagame improperly. Metagame is kind of outside the game. But this is where an extra layer of the game comes on top. So Street Fighter 4 already has a slight extra little metagame when it comes to its super meter. And the ultra meter. When you play the game, a lot of the times your super meter is designed to give you those little small areas of advantage, give you those extra ways to get in. Also, a lot of the times there are ways to help you land the ultra. So while you're playing the game, although you're thinking about, okay, let me just hit my opponent with all my moves, you also have to think about a little bit about this meter management, right? But then let's talk about King of Fighters. All right, let's talk about how this game works and why your mindset has to be different. When you're playing King of Fighters, for example, let's say you play your first game and your opponent beats your first character. He comes in and he beats your second character as well. He's got all three of his characters left. But his first character is down to just a tiny bit of life. You get your third character in. Now, here's the interesting part. If the game were as simple as, you know what, let me just use all my weapons to beat all three of his characters, the game would be very straightforward, be very simple, probably would be just as popular as Street Fighter, but there's a lot of things about it that change. Because what you start finding out is that King of Fighters is not as straightforward. King of Fighters, probably out of all the fighting games right now, is one of the most resource management heavy games there is. Yeah, like I mentioned in Street Fighter, you have super meter, and you can use the super meter as a tool. But when you play King of Fighters, the super meter and the HD gauge are crucial, are literally essential to winning the match. If you do not think about that stuff, you will not win at even intermediate to high level play. You can maybe squeak out a few wins or something like that, but without the proper thought process, you are not going to be able to win a game. So let's talk about the scenario that we had. If I have my character and I lost my first two characters and I have one character left, all full life, and I'm going up against a team of three. And let's just say that the first character of my opponent's down to a tiny bit of life. Things are going to be very, very, very different based on how much meter you have. The thing that you have to start realizing right now is that you are not going to win unless you can kill one of his characters with a super beefy combo. If you have both of your HD gauges, if you're sitting on both of your HD gauges, your whole goal now is to make sure you can hit confirm into an HD combo and blow them away, right? So one of the biggest advantages of HD combos is they allow you to cancel into Neomaxes for only 2 super meters. For those of you unfamiliar with King of Fighters, your last character will have 5 meters they can build up. But most importantly, Neomaxes, which are the big comeback move of the game, which do a ton of damage, take 3 meters to do unless you activate an HD gauge. Once you activate the HD gauge, it only takes 2 meters. So right away, there's a little bit of benefit to landing the HD combo because now you can do more damage for less meter. So the few times, I don't know if the people out there have actually watched a few Wednesday night fights where sometimes I've jumped on, actually it's the run back. Sometimes I've jumped onto the microphone and done commentary with the answer with Oscar. And usually when I'm on the stream there, since I don't know the game, the details of the game very well, whenever I'm on the stream with Oscar, I talk about this mindset, about how we want to use the resources. So in that scenario that I presented, you probably want to kill the first character without using very much meter. The key is 2 meters. The key is having 2 levels of meter. So if I have 4 meters or if I have 3 meters, I may go ahead and just use one of the meters once I get a chance to kill that first character. Because then I have a full HD combo, I have 2 meters. If I can touch the second character and activate an HD combo, I can potentially kill that entire character and get into the final round, with full life versus his full life. That's kind of the mindset that you have to start thinking of when you play these games. If you are not thinking about that, if you are thinking Street Fighter style, if you are thinking very straightforward mentality-wise, and you go, okay, I just need to kill this character, and then you kill that character with whatever means you can, and use meters that you shouldn't be using, now you aren't going to have the resources left to take out the last 2 characters. By not having the right mindset and taking out that first character, you have basically set yourself up for failure. And that is one of the important things about, that's why mindset is such an important thing for fighting games. So there's a lot of different ways to look at this. You can use 1 HD bar for 1 HD cancel to kill that first character. Because what you're thinking is now is, I am going to use my HD combo to kill the last character. So if you use that 1 HD combo, so you have 2 HD bars, right? If you blow one of them for an HD cancel to kill that first character, you now have an entire second character to fight. And during the course of you fighting that second character, you will probably lose some of your life. You'll get down to about half life. But you will probably build up your entire HD gauge again. So when you build up your entire HD gauge, and you have half your life, and you get to your opponent's last character, I've always said this about King of Fighters, as long as you have 2 HD gauges and 2 super meters, when you get to the last character, it almost doesn't matter how much life you have compared to how much life they have, because one touch can drain them 80%, 90%, maybe even kill them, depending on if, you're Shen Wu or something like that, who can kill everybody in a crazy combo, right? So this kind of resource management, I'm not telling you like this is exactly how you should think. If you have 3 characters left, think about those 2 examples, killing the character right away without using any meter, and then using your HD combo and a Neo Max to kill the second character so that you get into the last fight, full life versus full life. What you're doing is you're counting on your life as the resource to fight the third character. If you choose to use the HD meter to kill the first character, and you go into the second character, lose some life, but gain all your HD meter back to kill that character, you are now counting on your HD bar and your super meters as the resource to kill the last character. These are just 2 examples of how you can approach the match from that point after you've lost your first 2 characters to your opponent's first character. There are 2 examples. There's all sorts of different ways to approach it. But the important thing is the mindset, is the mentality that you have to have, is the foresight, looking into the future of how you plan to win this match and how you plan to use your resources. You have 3 resources: HD gauge, super meter, and your life meter. And you are taking all 3 of those resources, gauging them appropriately, and figuring out how you're going to kill your opponent. See, in Street Fighter, this is not as much of an issue. Yeah, you save meter between rounds. Meter can be very important for uppercut FADC. You've heard, I know you've heard Gutek say this a lot. The super meter is more important than life. You've probably heard me and David talk about wasting meter going between rounds. But the thing about Street Fighter is that you can always find a way without necessarily having meter. Yeah, the meter helps, but it's not vital. In King of Fighters, I feel like the meter is absolutely vital. If you are on 0 meter, 0 HD gauge, and you have 2 characters to kill with your 1 character, you are going to lose. That's just how it goes. If you do not save it, because if they're sitting on all this meter, they will be able to kill you a lot faster. So this is something very important. If you want to jump into King of Fighters, it's this mindset that's very important to have. So transitioning from Street Fighter to King of Fighters, not so direct. Even though they're both very similar kind of games, there's definitely a lot more meter management that must be done in King of Fighters. So that's one good example here. Let me go on break, and when I come back, I'm going to start talking about Marvel vs. Capcom 3 and talk a little bit about the mentality that you have to have in that game, which is kind of ironic because I personally have had trouble getting this mentality. It's why I've been having trouble with this game. But let's talk about it in a little bit once I get back. All right, everybody, welcome back to First Attack. I'm James Chen, and today we have been talking about mindsets in fighting games. But before we get back to that, I was just telling David during the break, I was really sad on the way home. I was driving today. I saw this van for like a Halloween party thing, and on the back of the van, on the side of the van, they had their phone number, which was 1-800-4-SPOOKY. And I really, really, really wanted to take a picture of that just so we could use it for Call Spooky memes, but unfortunately, I could not drive and take photos at the same time because I tried, but it was very dangerous, so I changed my mind. But it would have been awesome if I had gotten that picture. Any case, so I'm talking about mindsets. I just talked about how Street Fighter, basic mindset, use the tools that you have to defeat the opponent, and then King of Fighters, which I talked about being a super, super resource-heavy management game. Probably one of the most resource management games there is, which is actually one of the cool things about it. It's one of my favorite aspects of it, which is why when I watch it, it's the first thing that I pay attention to all the time because it's so important on how they use their meter. And that's one of the things that I always try to pay attention to when I watch top level play. I always try to see where they use their meter when they feel comfortable. Because in Street Fighter, sometimes if you're Guile, you're just going to throw an EX Sonic Boom. But throwing an EX Fireball in King of Fighters can be so costly if you don't use it right. And then they've also got things like the, guard cancels and the evasive cancels and stuff like that. So, it's very intriguing. Next time you guys watch King of Fighters, high-level King of Fighters match, and in fact, if you guys are watching the run back later this week or any other stream that has King of Fighters, pay attention to that. Watch it and pay attention to the meter and start finding out how you can use that different mindset to watch games differently. So, for example, another great example of different mindsets is Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. God, that game, the mindset of that game is so different than Street Fighter completely. And I'm going to compare everything to Street Fighter, okay? Because like I said, Street Fighter, perfect base, because there's not a lot of extra layers on top of Street Fighter. It is the mind game at the core. There's very little else you have to think about. Marvel vs. Capcom 3 is very different because in Street Fighter is a defensive game. The mindset of that game is to, in general, be a little bit more defensive. But, one of the best advice I've ever gotten about Marvel was from Flo. And, once I started blocking some attacks, I said, how do I get away from this? And he's like, you don't, you die. I was like, that doesn't make any sense, right? Then how does anybody survive this? And his response is, they don't end up blocking it, right? They just don't get caught in that situation. And that's a very different mindset already, is that, defense is bad. It's just like as soon as you get trapped in that situation, you're going to die. So it's really about avoidance. So the bigger picture is Marvel becomes more important about spatial relationships. Because in Street Fighter, you get this. Street Fighter 4, it's very this. It's just horizontal right there. And jumping is kind of, you've heard the general advice in Street Fighter 4, don't jump, it's a mistake, right? You have to be very careful about when you jump and such. So Street Fighter, very horizontal game. So when you play this game, of course, you're going to be more defensive because you only really have one angle to cut off. The thing about Marvel now is that if you're only picturing this horizontal game, then you are going to die, all right? Because Marvel is about avoiding your opponent, about not being in that situation in the first place. One of the things that you hear me and David talk about a lot in Super Turbo, why we love Super Turbo so much, is because there's so many situations where you can just force your opponent into making a bad choice or a worse choice. And it's just fantastic because once you have control over your opponent, it's amazing, right? So Marvel is kind of the same thing, except once you get your opponent blocking something, now it's just like they are going to die unless they can find a miracle. And that's why whenever you see someone block like 7 things in a row, it's just like, what the heck? If you guys remember watching Evo, when Infrit blocked Flocker's mix-ups with Zero like 7 or 8 times in a row and got away unscathed, that was a miracle. That was a miracle. You'll probably remember hearing me in commentary. One of the things I say all the time, over and over and over again, is you can block 9 times, but they'll hit you with the 10th one and you're still dead. Because that is such an important mentality to understand. Just because you blocked and because you got onto the defensive, in Street Fighter, that's a success. When you successfully defend an offense, for most characters, that is a success. So, for example, if Ibuki or Akuma tries to do a vortex on you, if you successfully block their vortex, you're still in a bad position, but you know what? That's a success. In Marvel, if I successfully block Dante's instant air dash B and it hits me from behind, but I turn around and block it in time, that is not a success. That is a failure because I have blocked. And now I am in this horrible situation where he's going to instant air dash over me again and hit me. He's going to teleport and call in a Magneto assist and it's going to shoot me into him or whatever like that. It is not a good situation. So the mindset of Marvel now is less about, directly how do I combat my opponent. It's you have to picture the spatial relationship. Where am I and where is my opponent and how do I get into the position where they are least threatening? One of the reasons why Wesker has dropped a little bit in tiers is because people are starting to figure out that getting in the opposite corner from Wesker is actually very useful. Wesker does not have a means to attack this corner. If you remember in the episode about attack vectors, I talked exactly about this example. Wesker has trouble hitting over here. So, it's a very spatial relationship kind of thing. Not only about the spatial relationship in Marvel, the other part about Marvel that you have to have a very different mindset, I think, than all fighting games, than pretty much every other fighting game, is I'm a computer programmer, so apologies for me using some computer programming language here. The one thing that makes Marvel hard for a lot of players to play is the multi-threaded factor of Marvel. One of the things that I find myself having so much trouble is that when you play Street Fighter, you have your one opponent to look at. You've got one opponent to take care of. Even if it's Guile and he throws a sonic boom and starts following it, Guile is still the only threat. There's only one thread for me to pay attention to. There's only one character to look at, one thing to focus on, one thread to think about. In Marvel, this has completely changed. One of the very earliest games that I played at Wednesday Night Fights when it was over there was against P. Gorath. And he was using Wolverine and Shuma Gorath. And he had the Shuma Gorath Mystic Ray assist. And what he would do with Wolverine, and Wolverine plus Shuma Gorath, very amazing combination. In fact, one of the Team Hazmat players from Arizona, oh God, I forgot which one it was. But he uses the same combination now. He uses the Wolverine and Shuma Gorath combination. And so what happened was he does Berserker Slash, gets behind you, hits you from the other side, and then the Mystic Ray comes out and shoots you. So basically he saves himself and he hits you. He gets a big long combo off of that because Berserker Slash knocks into the air, Mystic Ray hits you, and Wolverine gets the free combo off of it. In my game versus P. Gorath, I blocked Wolverine's Berserker Slash, and I was like, I know this has delay, time to punish, you're dead. And then I got shot by Shuma Gorath, and then he killed me. And then he did it again. I blocked Wolverine's Berserker Slash, and I was like, alright, I blocked, you're dead, I'm going to kill you now. And then Shuma Gorath shot me, and I died again. And it was really sad, because it happened to me like 5 times in the same match. And you'd think I'd learn, right? But again, it's the mindset problem. My mindset is so single-threaded. Like, I only just think about this one thing that I have to worry about. So I'm only looking at Wolverine. I only see Wolverine. And I'm not thinking about Shuma Gorath at all. I'm not thinking about that character's existence. I just completely forgot he's there. And it's really hard for players who are used to something like Street Fighter to go to Marvel for this very reason. It's hard to keep your mind on 2 things at once, to realize you can be attacked from another angle by another character. And the worst thing about this, too, is it manifests yourself on offense as well. When you watch the top players play, they're so good at calling assists. Like, I always joke that Justin makes the Akuma assist look way more powerful than it is. Like, it's faster when Justin uses it, it has more priority when Justin uses it, and it's because he understands how to use it in a multi-threaded fashion. There's 2 threads of offense. He's thinking, I have Wolverine, and he's thinking, I have Akuma. So one of the things that he told me is he'll always call Akuma when his opponent push blocks him. So he'll jump attack, he'll push block, so he'll call Akuma. Akuma jumps to where Wolverine was and starts hitting him. So now the opponent is stuck in this block stun from the jump attack into Akuma assist. So even though he got push block, he's got all this time to run forward and catch up. So he always knows I can call Akuma whenever I get push block. This is completely different than like Guile throwing a sonic boom and chasing after it. This is a very different thing, because when you're Guile, you're still throwing the sonic boom. And when you're chasing the sonic boom, you're still chasing the sonic boom. The interesting thing about it is, if you don't have this multi-threaded mind state, if you don't have the ability to think about it properly, once the opponent blocks your jump attack and pushes you away, you're just thinking, dang it, he pushed my Wolverine away, how am I going to get back in? You're not thinking about your assists. You're not thinking about what to do with them and how to utilize them to your advantage because they're moving on a completely separate projectile. You can use them while you're in the middle of your attack. So it's this kind of multi-threaded mindset. So that's one of the things that makes Marvel so hard to learn for a lot of players. So it's very important to understand that when you approach, if you're a Street Fighter player and you're jumping into Marvel, you can't play the game exactly like you would play Street Fighter. You have to have a completely different mindset. You have to understand space and staying away from your opponent, avoiding your opponent, and you have to understand this very delicate control of multiple characters and at the same time be aware of the multiple paths of your opponent's attack, the multi-threaded, options that your opponent has as well. And so it's very hard to learn. It's two things that I've been struggling with for a very long time. To be honest with you, if I played the game more, I might be over it right now, but since I never play the game, it's really hard for me to get that mentality. But that is the right way to think about those games, is how to, it's don't worry, at the end of this whole episode, I'll tie this whole thing together. But, it's very important to understand that when you approach these different games, you have to have a different mindset. Street Fighter, very straightforward. King of Fighters, very resource, dependent. And in Marvel, it's all about spatial and this kind of multi-threaded aspect. So I'm going to take another break. And when I come back, I'm going to talk about Guilty Gear, Blaze Blue, and Persona, and how the mindset for these games works. And it's a very interesting mechanic that ArcSys has used in all three games. So we'll talk about that when I come back. Welcome back, everybody, to First Attack. Talking about mindsets, I've kind of gone over King of Fighters and Marvel and how they're different than Street Fighter. Street Fighter, of course, always the base, always the standard. It's very straightforward. It's why everybody plays the game. It's why it's so much easier for everybody to pick up. It's why it's going to be easier to convince your friends to play that game than a lot of the other games. And so the last series of games that I wanted to talk about in terms of mindset, I'll probably jump into a few other games a little bit briefly, but the last ones I'm going to talk about in detail are Guilty Gear, Blaze Blue, and Persona. And ArcSys designed all three of these games. Not a surprise to me, because they all have a very similar mindset compared to a lot of other games in that. So a lot of you guys probably don't know this, but when the original Guilty Gear came out on PlayStation 1, there was a mechanic in the game. This is the very first Guilty Gear. There was a mechanic in the game where instead of doing a special move with the button that activates it, so for example, Soul had Fireball, Uppercut, and Spin Kick. Instead of hitting it with the button that activated a special move, there was a special charge button. So if you did the code with the charge button, instead of doing a special move, they would start powering up and you'd see a bar build at the bottom. It's very similar to how Holy Order Soul behaves. So you would do the move and charge up your special move, and if you got it to level 2, the next time you did your uppercut, it would be a level 2 uppercut, go back to level 1. And if you got it all the way to level 3, it would be a level 3, etc., etc. And unfortunately, the mechanic was very poorly implemented, led to very easy infinites, but we won't get into that. The important thing to keep in mind is that this concept of powering up your character has basically lasted throughout all of these games that ArcSys have made. They've become very obsessed with this concept of powering up. For example, Johnny, my favorite character in Guilty Gear. Coins. You hit people with coins, powers up your Mistfinder. Mistfinder is his most, his go-to weapon, his go-to attack. But if you hit him with a coin, it becomes more powerful, right? If you hit him with 2 coins, you get a level 3, you get more damage. Jam. Jam has these moves, but at the same time, you can activate these cards. If you manage to activate these cards, you can do more damage. You get special abilities out of these things. Let's talk about like Eddie, for example. You want to control Eddie, and he's got his own little separate meter. You know, if Eddie gets hit and goes away, you have to wait longer for Eddie to be usable again. But if you use him effectively and then automatically put him away, meter builds up faster, etc., etc. Then you go to games like Blaze Blue, which, I mean, I saw a lot of people giving a lot of hate to Blaze Blue, and, you know, so I honestly don't know the game as well as as Guilty Gear. Persona, I mean, I probably even know Persona more than I know Guilty Gear, more than I know Blaze Blue right now. But, you know, there is still very much this concept in Blaze Blue about, you know, setting people... you know what, I'm going to skip Blaze Blue. I don't know that game very well at all, so I'm not even going to lie. So let's talk about Persona a little bit here, all right? So Persona, very similar to Eddie. You know, Aegis has the Orgia mode, I think that's what it's called, where, you know, you can manage that meter and fly, and if it runs out, you have to wait forever for it to build up, right? Or if you manually deactivate it, it builds up faster. You have characters like, for example, what's your face? Elizabeth, right? You have this meter building up, and you have all these different ways to use your meter. You have Yukiko, who has this ability to set up these unblockable fire. You have Labris, who has the ability to charge up her axe. You know, it starts off in one mode, and as you keep using it, it gets more and more powerful. Naoto, she has the skull system, where if you drain enough skulls, she gets those supers that can instantly kill you, etc., etc. Akihiko, you have the tornado, the cyclone meter, right? So what I'm trying to get at here is that every character, in the best way possible, to put it in the simplest way possible that will help most people understand, ArcSys loves Phoenix Wright characters. What they do is they create characters with sub-goals. So, for example, let's go with Johnny, or actually let's use Persona as as a good example here. So what happens is you can do, like, let's say, for example, you can do a combo that does this much damage here, right? But sometimes that's not what you want to do. What you're going to want to do instead is do a combo that does this much damage, but sets you up so that the next combo lets you do this much damage. A lot more damage. If you do normal combos that are like this, you'll get this much damage. But if you do the weaker combo first, and then you get this big damage here, it's going to pay off in the long run. So what happens is that as you play your characters in this game, one of the hard things about Persona is that it's not as straightforward as Street Fighter. It's not as direct. And a lot of times, if you see someone miss an uppercut, and you walk up to the opponent in Street Fighter, when you're ready to punish them, what do they say? Find your max damage combo. Do as much damage as you can. Use whatever meter you have available to you. You know, you're going to do a little bit of meter management. I'm winning by a lot, so I don't want to use a lot of meter. You know, I'm winning by a little bit, so I want to use everything I have so I can kill them. But for the most part, when they miss their uppercut, you will be doing the best thing that you can. If someone misses an uppercut and you throw them, you wasted an opportunity there, right? In a game like Persona, game like Guilty Gear, which is coming out pretty soon, I don't even think there's a release date yet for that. This is not the case at all. This is very, very untrue. Whenever someone leaves themselves open, you do not necessarily want to hit them with the most damaging move. In fact, most of the time you probably won't. I use Johnny as an example with the coins. A lot of the times you want to hit someone with standing kick into sweep into coin. Just so you can hit them with coin. Maybe you even want to throw them. And when you throw them, instead of doing a combo that's going to do this much damage, you're going to hit them with a coin, which does this much damage. But that's because what it does is it sets up later on for you to do this gigantic chunk of damage. It's just going to let you do so much more damage in the long run. And it's kind of interesting because now you have this secondary goal that you have to think about, that you have to consider. Again, it's very Phoenix Wright style. It's very Frank West style. A lot of the times, well, actually, even Frank West is not necessarily true because the crux of Frank West is taking camera. But imagine right now, okay, let's picture Frank West. I'm sure a lot of people out there are more used to Marvel. Let's think about Frank West. What if you could not super cancel his camera? What if when you took a picture, that was the end of it? That was guaranteed the end of your combo. You couldn't do anything else unless you called an assist. Now, whenever you finish air combos, you could OTG them with the shopping cart, or you could take pictures and power them up. Now you have these two different paths to think about. Do I want to get more powerful so I can do more damage later, or do I want to do the damage now and sacrifice that ability to do more damage later? That is the kind of mindset that you have when playing games like Persona, when you're playing games like Guilty Gear. Now, this is not true for every character, obviously. You have characters like you, pretty straightforward character, right? I mean, you just have to... He's more like a Marvel character, kind of this multi-threaded aspect, learning how to use your persona properly to lock people down. So not every character is like this, but a lot of characters are. So, for example, if I'm Naoto, maybe what I want to do is, if I have the choice between doing this huge damage combo or draining some skulls out of them, so maybe in the next round I have the opportunity to only drain, just fewer skulls so that I can kill them with one of my, instant kill SP skills, then maybe that's what I want to do. Maybe that's my mentality. I'll sacrifice the damage just so I can land these kind of situations. Or for example, I'm not particularly familiar with Labris, but maybe Labris has some combos that will do more damage, but other combos that will build up more of her axe gauge so that, you'll do more damage later on. Same thing with Aegis, for example. Maybe I want to do a combo that does less damage but sets me up into Orgia mode properly to get more damage later on, or maybe I want to do something, end my combo so that I can build my Orgia meter back faster than if I went into a full combo, for example. So what happens is you have to weigh these different options. You have to think about it a little differently. It's not as straightforward as Street Fighter is. Street Fighter, pretty much, like I said, if you see them miss something, kill them with as most damage as possible. It's even same thing with Marvel, right? Marvel, yeah, maybe you want to weigh an X Factor or whatever like that, but no matter what, you're always just doing as much damage as you possibly can. In Guilty Gear, in Persona, in Blaze Blue, a lot of the times you're going to be dropping damage specifically to set yourself up to do something else. And so when you play Persona, you have to understand that there are these sub goals that you have to keep in mind. It's not as straightforward as you want to. I talked about, Marvel being multi-threaded. In a way, Persona is kind of the same way, but it's multi-threaded on one character. You have multiple goals with the one character. Power myself up and defeat the opponent, maybe even defend myself, right? And so these are the kind of things that you have to weigh against each other. And so a lot of players, when they come from Street Fighter, when they play Persona, one of the things that makes it hard to play that game is there are a lot of decisions to be made in this game. There are a lot of things to think about, and sometimes it can be overwhelming for people who just want to play a standard game, where they're just hitting buttons. Well, if that's the case, then play Mitsuru, right? That's what everybody says about her, right? Just hit A a lot and you win. So, obviously not every character is like that, but A lot of the more complex characters in the game are like that. So if you do want to play some of those complex characters, you got to start learning how to judge the different kinds of thought process that you want to play. So, if you come from Street Fighter and you're playing a game like Persona, definitely change your mindset. Think about these multiple goals that your character is going to have and how to, weigh which one to use. Another thing that's actually pretty important to point out is, I talked about King of Fighters being resource heavy. Well, in Persona and in Guilty Gear, between rounds, you always get dropped down to 0 meter. So those games aren't even as resource heavy as King of Fighters is. You actually you don't have to worry about that as much. So again, if you're a King of Fighters player and you're jumping over to Persona, you don't want to worry about the resource management like that. So, okay, so I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, I'm going to kind of tie the whole thing together and do a few extra Ask jchensor questions. If anybody has any questions about anything that I talked about today on the stream, feel free to ask, and I'll be looking at some questions during the break. All right, we'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody, to First Attack. I'm James Chen, and I've been talking about mindsets in different games. I wanted to tie the whole thing together, but before I do that, I want to talk about run through a few quick mindsets, and talk about something like Soul Calibur, Virtua Fighter. If you guys remember in the episode where we brought Gerald on, he talked very much about this taking turns kind of aspect and stealing turns. It's another great example of mindsets. Soul Calibur, very similar kind of style play. I imagine Tekken is very similar as well. I'm hoping when Tekken Tag 2 comes out, we'll be able to learn a lot about that game as well. So, we'll hopefully have somebody on who will be able to help us all learn Tekken. But yeah, so again, different mentality. A lot of people are also talking about Smash Brothers games. Very different mentality. That's another. I talked about Marvel, how there's a spatial relationship. Smash Brothers is very much about that. I mean, it is, I guess, when I play it, because I always play free for all 4 characters, so it's probably a little different on one-on-one. But again, needless to say, very different mindset. So tying it all back together, the original question was, when you play different games, do you think in a different way? And the answer is absolutely yes, yes, yes. And that is what makes it hard to jump from game to game. But that's what makes it super important to play from game to game. So let's say I'm a player and I want to be good at Street Fighter. I play a ton of King of Fighters, and King of Fighters teaches me all this awesome resource management. Now when I go back to Street Fighter, all of a sudden, I have this better understanding of how not to waste my meter. Or even more importantly, let's play Cross Tekken, the game where people waste meter like you can't even humanly imagine, right? Maybe playing a lot of King of Fighters and understanding how resource management works will help you stop wasting all of your meter in Cross Tekken. If you play Marvel and you start thinking more about, the spatial relationship of characters, it could improve your spacing in Street Fighter. And in fact, that whole mentality of not getting put into that situation where your opponent has you locked down and you're screwed once you block might actually help you learn to fight Seth better, might help you learn to fight Viper better, Akuma better. You might learn how to deal with the vortexes better, and, just in general, your reactions could probably improve. If you play against Persona and you start understanding this concept of different goals, when you play Street Fighter, now if you're winning by a ton of life and your opponent is down to this much meter, you might think to yourself, you know what? I'm going to play the end of this round a little differently. I'm going to play it to chuck more fireballs because what I want to do is build more meter. I'm going to build a lot more meter. If he jumps, as soon as he jumps over one fireball and combos me, then I'll finish him off. Different goals, presenting different things. If you start playing Virtua Fighter a lot, play Soul Calibur a lot, you're going to learn this concept of stealing turns and knowing when your opponent is supposed to get in there. And it'll help your frame traps a lot better. In fact, Flo, he's always told me whenever he plays fighting games, he's so good at frame traps and knowing that weird timing when to hit a button to catch the opponent right when the opponent wants to touch a button because he played a lot of Soul Calibur. He learned that skill from Soul Calibur and he's applying it to the other games. So it's very, very important to play a lot of these different games. You learn a lot of different skills. And so it's good to jump between games, keep your mindset switched so that when you go back to your old games, you will find yourself improving in ways that you didn't think about. Not only that, the other thing that makes it important is that when you learn different games, when the new games come out, you will adapt quicker. I've only played Street Fighter games my whole life. I've also played a little Guilty Gear here and there, but for the most part, I've always been a Street Fighter player. And that is why it has been so hard for me to get into a game like Marvel, because I'm having so much trouble adapting to this game. We've seen this a lot with a lot of Marvel 2 players. A lot of Marvel 2 players, when Marvel 3 came out, they couldn't play Marvel 3. It took, obviously Yipes is back on top now. He just won Summer Jam. But how long did it take him? For a long time during Vanilla, he had so much trouble struggling through that. A lot of Marvel 2 players aren't able to pick it up. But then, what about Justin? What about Combo Fiend? What about players like that? Chris G, who play multiple games. They jumped on Marvel, and they were good at that game pretty fast. And it's because they played multiple games, so when they jumped into the game, they didn't have any bad habits. They've understood how to adjust, and they know how to change their mindset. That is so important to be good, getting good at multiple games, getting good at the games you already play, and getting good at future games. It's such an important thing to learn, how to have a variable mindset. And that's why Vi always preaches play multiple games, play multiple games, play multiple games. Because in the long run, it will only benefit your game in the end. So, that's kind of the reason why I wanted to talk about all these different mindsets. I wanted to help people understand that these games, you do have to think very differently between them. And that's not a bad thing. If you find it hard to play these other games, like I can't get the mindset like me, there are days where I'm just like, you know what, I gotta give up on Marvel because this is just like I'm torturing myself. It's like masochism, but I'm determined to learn this. I'm gonna stick with it. I'm gonna keep playing it until I figure this out. And, in the end, I know it's gonna benefit me more. The very first time when Vanilla Marvel came out, all I did was play Vanilla Marvel, and then when I went back to Super Street Fighter, I was better at Street Fighter all of a sudden. So, I've told that story a lot, but there's a reason why that happened. It's because Marvel taught me skills that I didn't have in Street Fighter before. So it expanded my game. So I'm just telling everybody out there, if you jump to another game, if you jump to Persona, if you jump to King of Fighters, because everyone's talking about these games, and you play these games and you're like, I don't like the way this game feels. It doesn't feel like Street Fighter. This game sucks, right? Or you play Marvel and you try Persona or King of Fighters or Virtua Fighter and you're like, this game doesn't feel like what I want to play at all. This game sucks. I don't want to play it. Try not to think that way. Try to grind through it and try to understand that you really need to change your mind to get good at these games. And once you do, the only person who's going to benefit is yourself. So, definitely give these games a shot. Give these games a real shot. And really, 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 really learn how to be flexible in your mindset. All right, so before I stop, I just want to remind everyone that coming up next, Ultra David is back in town, so he will be doing a Level 3 Focus episode here, going over the Yipes Chris G match from this last weekend. Also, want to remind everyone that tomorrow on the UltraChen TV show, we will be. Last week we revealed the Aftershock tournament, NorCal, SoCal, in Marvel 3, and tomorrow we are going to be revealing the NorCal roster. So definitely tune in for that. That should be super exciting for that. And before I go, I want to answer a few more of those Ask jchensor questions that I was asked. Let's see if I can get through a few of these. I mean, seriously, guys, thank you again for sending in your messages. I got like a gazillion of them last week, and I will do another Ask jchensor segment at some point in time, but for now I'm just going to do a few extra ones of these. So there was one that someone asked me that he was a little concerned. Okay, so this is what he said here. This is from Samson here. He said, on my episode on First Attack, answering questions from viewers, I answered 2 questions of which my responses seemed contradictory. So one question was regarding if it was possible for scrubs to actually become top players, or let's just say beginners becoming top players. And I said, yes, absolutely, because we all started as scrubs. But then someone asked me as well how much time I put into the game, and my answer was, I'm not putting in enough. Like, it doesn't even matter. I shouldn't even quantify like an hour or 2 hours a week, because obviously I'm not putting in enough, and that's why I'm doing so bad. And so what he said to me was, these answers seem contradictory to me, because on the one hand, you're saying you believe it's possible for anyone to become a top player, but on the other hand, you're saying essentially that you don't have enough time to put in the game to get good enough to compete with top players. So, he expands on this saying, is it possible for someone that has a day job and only practices 20 to 25 hours a week to become a top player? I like how he says only 20 to 25 hours a week. Is that still not enough, as you put it? Also, is it possible to become a top player if there is no solid local scene? Okay, so let's address this a little bit. Really not much of a contradictory statement. I do believe anybody can be a top player. However, you need to put in the time. You really do need to put in the time. There's very few things in life that you are going to get good at without putting in the time. One of the things that I've had a long conversation about this with Serlin a long time ago, David Serlin. I'm hoping a lot of you guys know him, very prominent member of the fighting game community a long time ago. He and I had this conversation, and there was always this thing that he remembers reading about, you can't become an expert in something until you put in, I forgot what it was like 10,000 hours or something like that. Is it 10,000 hours? Yeah, like you can only be an expert in something if you put 10,000 hours into it, and that's absolutely true. There are some people who are only going to need to put in 2,000, some people who need to put in 8,000, some people who may need to put in 20,000 hours to get that good. But regardless, the point is that you have to put in the time. I was a top player a long time ago, back in the CVS1, CVS2 era, in Alpha 3. I was always a threat in tournaments. I put in the time. My God, I played these games all day. I had a huge advantage because at that time, my roommates and we just played every single day. When CVS1 first came out on the console, I played every day. I used every character. I random select the hell out of that game, and I learned everything. And so when I went to my first Golfland tournament, I knocked Vi into losers. Eventually, he beat me in grand finals, but I got second place. Next weekend, I played again, got second place again. And, this kept going all the way through CVS2 before roll canceling, because when roll canceling came out, I gave up on the game because I thought it ruined the game. Little did I know it made the game better. But even in CVS2, I always was consistently top 3, top 4 at every Golfland weekly. It's always Vi, Viscant, Sin from Team Run, Alex Salguero, and myself. We were always top 4. It was always the 4 of us getting the top, and that's because I put in the time at that point. But nowadays, I don't put in the time at all, and frankly, I do not have similar. So there are different people. They will learn different ways. Guys like Justin don't need to put in the practice as often to stay as good. For me, I'm definitely a quantity player. I need to keep playing, be put into all the different situations so I know how to react to situations. When I don't play enough, everything is foreign to me and I die. So right now, let's just say I decide to stop doing commentary. I quit my job. I'm not doing UltraChen TV anymore, and I cancel my Twitter account. Then and I just sat down and played fighting games all day, and I traveled and I went and find all these people to play. I would 100% be really good at fighting games again. I could 100% get back to that level, but right now I'm just not doing it. It's not where my priorities lie, unfortunately. So that's why I'm not as strong as I used to be. So, I do believe that I'm not putting in enough hours, and it doesn't matter how, it doesn't matter what my answer is because I'm just not putting in enough to be good. But at the same time, if I did put in the answer, if I did put in the time for that, I could definitely get that good again. And, he did ask, if there isn't a lot of local competition around, would you still be able to get good? And everyone always likes to bring in the Wolf Crone examples and stuff like that. I mean, yeah, you can play a lot online, get a lot of experience. Just again, it's about familiarizing yourself with all the situations. Granted, that requires that you have a good internet connection. If you don't have a good internet connection, it is going to be very difficult, I'm not going to lie. But you can do it. You can do it. In some games, it's easier than others. There was reports of a Smash Brothers player who showed up out of nowhere and just killed everybody in Melee. Marvel, it's a little bit easier if you can master your traps and your rushdowns really well and your combos, and you can be consistent with them. You can one-touch a death people. Like if you get really good at Zero, for example. Zero is the number one example. If you just learn all of his mix-ups and make sure you're consistent with your lightning loops, you can get pretty good. In games like Street Fighter, it is going to be a little bit harder because you definitely need human interaction in that game. So without a local scene, you've really got to count on online, and that is really hard. And if you don't have the online as well, and you only have yourself, then watch a lot of videos. And maybe watching match videos a lot to learn is another skill in itself. Me and David covered that a little bit in one episode, but again, another important thing about watching match videos, put yourself in the position of one of the characters. Always put yourself in the position of one of your characters and keep thinking about okay, I would jump here because I think he's going to throw a fireball. And then you see the opponent not throw a fireball. Your character doesn't jump either, but then you think to yourself, man, if I jumped there, I would have gotten an uppercut. Kind of stuff like that. Play the game while you watch the game. When you watch match videos, that'll help. And then if you can, just try to find a way to get to a tournament. Find out what's the largest local tournament near you and get to that tournament. And, if you're near Seasons Beatings, if it takes you 6 hours to drive to Seasons Beatings, if it takes you 7 hours to drive to Final Round, if it takes you, 4 hours to drive to Southern California Regionals, plan a trip around it, man. Find a friend who's willing to go with you. Road trips are fun. Road trips are a lot of fun. If you're not old enough to drive yourself, well, you're just going to have to wait till you're old enough to drive yourself. So, but one of my first road trips was going up to B3. My brother drove at that point in time. So if you can find an older brother or something who's interested and willing to drive as well, you can do that as well. But it's hard. It's a hard road if you do not have local competition. But you can do it if you put your mind to it and if you really are dedicated to it. So, oh, I'm sorry. Am I banging on the table like that? Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah, I'm probably causing a lot of noise there. Sorry about that, Billy Mitchell. I never want to mess around with the man who brings us hot sauce, I think it is, and wears those American ties, dude. They're amazing stuff. Okay, so, wow, I took up my whole segment answering that one question. Let's see if I can answer at least one other really short question here. I'm just going to randomly pick one here. Oh, okay, here's some easy ones here. William Borland asks me, non-gameplay question, what's your favorite fighting game soundtrack? 100% Street Fighter 2. It's just the best soundtrack ever. I mean, come on. All those songs are so iconic. Guile theme, you cannot fight the Guile theme, man. And that game actually has proper melodies. It's not just background music. It's actually melodies. So by far, yeah, that game has the best by far. So, Cole Diamond asked me, I've been thinking about trying to become a serious player in DOA 5 when it's released. However, I'm worried about how big its scene is going to become. How big do you think DOA 5 is going to become? That game's going to have some struggles, for sure. It's not going to be the most popular pick, but if enough people can play it and get good at it, if you get enough good representation for it, for example, Perfect Legend has said that he really wants to play this game. You know, we have guys like James Shea doing a great job promoting Persona. If you guys can, check out a video that he just made about, you know, the evasive action in Persona. Just a 4 or 5 minute tutorial on just that, talking about how it works and stuff like that. If enough people put in the effort to help promote the scene and can try, and the game is good, and the game turns out to be skillful and it has a level of hype, there's a chance that it can grow big, but it's going to take work. I was talking to someone on Twitter. You know, I basically said Persona absolutely has a chance to grow big if people can stick with it, and his response to me was, well, I hope it does. Let's see how it goes. And my response to him was, no, there is no let's see how it goes. We are in control of this. We are the fighting game community. We are 100% in control of this destiny. We can do everything we can to give it the best shot. So don't sit back and let's see how big DOA 5 grows. If you play it and you love it, start making tutorial videos, analyze some match videos, get some good matches. Look what Ryan Hunter is doing right now with Jibbo and Cross Tekken. They're doing a really good job. They have a lot of quality Cross Tekken footage out there where they analyze it and talk about it and stuff like that. You are absolutely capable of taking care of that. So I have Amber asking me, is there a skill level where it's not worth going to tournaments? My friends don't play fighting games a lot, so the only competition I can get is online, and I don't have a good connection. For example, I've never played much Street Fighter, you know, the whole series for her whole life, so her experience with that is very minimal to the point where I don't know inputs for some moves. That being said, would it be helpful to go out of my way to go to a tournament when it seems like it would take a while to understand the mind game aspect of the game? Seems like most players learn the basic like combos and system mechanics at home and go to tournaments, you know, for the mind game reading of your, you know, opponent aspect, which is kind of what I was talking about a little bit. So is it worth it going if you're not ready for that advanced level? And yes, absolutely worth going, because going to tournaments a lot of the times, there's two aspects of it. There's just gaining that experience, playing against other people. And don't worry if you do poorly. You know, it's the way everybody starts. Everybody has to do poorly at a tournament. But most thing that's important about tournaments is if you can go to the right tournaments. You know, I always have to put that caveat out there these days. Find the right tournaments, find the hype tournaments, and when you go there, the experience and the atmosphere is just too amazing. It's so worth going because it's fantastic. And what it does is it helps you appreciate, it gives you a stronger love of the game and the community, and it's just, you will get sucked in more. And, you know, very popular story from Sherry Jenix, actually. You know, she saw Justin win actually reset the bracket in 2009, and it was like just seeing how hype and the energy it was. That's kind of one of the things that really pushed her to wanting to get good at fighting games, you know, because it was just so hype. It was such a cool moment. You know, those kind of things can inspire you to become better players. So absolutely worth it to go to events and experience it. You know, there's two aspects of it. Like I said, there's the actual versus experience aspect to it. Even if you don't think you're good enough to go to a tournament and you go, don't play then. If you're really that worried about it, watch. But just make sure you pick up some experience, play some casuals while you have a chance if you see some open stations and they are available to casuals. But I always recommend playing, because getting that experience. The first time you sit down in a tournament, you will be nervous as hell. Your heart will beat so fast. And you will be shaking, and you will get this adrenaline rush. Might as well get that out of the way as early as possible. It's gonna happen. It's a rush. It's a good rush, though. It makes you feel alive. So I definitely recommend doing it, even if you don't think you're good enough. And Amber actually closes the email off of, also please write a paper explaining why you like Cammy so much. To be honest with you, it actually isn't going to take a paper to write that. Easiest way to explain it, no one played her in Super Turbo. She sucked in Super Turbo. Long time ago, I was a low-tier hero. I specifically played low-tier characters. That's all I ever looked for. Perfect example, Alpha 1, I played Chun-Li. Chun-Li was horrible in Alpha 1, so that's all I used. And in Alpha 2, she was one of the best characters in the game, so I dropped her. And I went to Zangief because I thought Zangief sucked, but it actually turned out, in the end, he was pretty good too. Alpha 3 was the game where I finally just said, you know what, forget this low-tier stuff, low-tier hero stuff, it's a pain. But I had grown so attached to Cammy in Super Turbo from playing her and being known as using her and being known as one of the premier Cammies in the country. I'm a man, I talked about it in the past, I have intense character loyalty. And so since then, it's just stuck. It's just stuck since then. When I use Cammy, I get those feelings like I had when I used her in Super Turbo. I just have a lot of attachment to the character now. And it's mostly just because low-tier hero status. Even in games like now in AE where she's not low-tier, right? She's actually a good character. So I'm still going to use her. Still going to use her now because I've dropped the low-tier hero stuff. But, it's just I have an attachment to her. I just really like the character now. So I'm going to keep using her pretty much in any game that's there. So, okay. I'm going to stop there. Guys, stick around. Ultra David will be on very shortly. He will be analyzing the Yipes Chris G match from Summer Jam 6 just this past weekend. Amazing grand finals. You definitely want to stick around and listen to and just listen to the analysis on the stuff that Yipes did because it was amazing stuff. So thanks everybody for tuning in to First Attack. And I'll see you tomorrow for the Tuesday something. All right, peace out, everybody.